What we already knew, Barry, that the President of the United States has a particular skill set, that he's identified an illness in Western democracies, but he has no cure for it and seems intent on exploiting it. And we've also learned that he has no desire and no capacity to lead the world. We learned that Donald Trump has pressed fast forward on the decline of the United States as a global leader. He managed to isolate his nation, to confuse and alienate his allies, and to diminish America.
That was blistering. I mean, really, tell us how you really feel. That was the political editor for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation offering his critique of Donald Trump at his first G20 summit, where it became clear that despite Trump's America First mantra, America is no longer first on the world stage. As the New York Times put it, the U.S. found itself isolated on everything from trade to climate change. Joining me now, Gordon Chang, columnist for the Daily Beast and author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. And back with me are David Corn and Tara Mahler. Gordon, I want to start with you, but before we start, let's hear what President Trump said about China's President Xi. Let's see that.
I appreciate the things that you have done relative to the very substantial problem that we all face in North Korea, a problem that something has to be done about. It will have eventually success. It may take longer than I'd like, may take longer than you'd like, but there will be success in the end, one way or the other.
Okay, now obviously that wasn't about President Xi, that was to President Xi at the G20, but I set that up because what the Australian Broadcasting Corporation political editor said in that entire blistering report that he made was that the United States was increasingly isolated and that a skillful leader would find a way to make consensus and bring the world together. And that one area was North Korea and the nuclear missile tests that everyone at the G20 was waiting for. They were waiting for the United States to do this, and nothing happened. Were you surprised by that?
I was surprised because I thought that, going into the G20, it was clear the U.S. had interests which were different than the rest of the G19. And clearly, this was going to be a contentious meeting. But I thought, and a lot of other people thought, that Trump would use North Korea to change the narrative at the G20, talk about how the threat to the world, how the United States had to deal with this, and how Europe actually had to follow in America's footsteps in crafting a solution. That would have been the skillful thing to do because he would have changed the narrative, and clearly he didn't do that. So this is going to be a problem going forward because the United States does need allies in dealing with North Korea, and when you have 19 other important economies in the room, you would expect him to marshal them, and it will cause that the United States finds to be critical.
Why don't you think he did that?
It's a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't think that he is that interested in being the leader of the free world, as you point out, and that is a critical shortcoming. But also because I think that in terms of developing and crafting a North Korea strategy, he's done some things which actually are quite good, but it's sort of premature for him to come out with this plan. But nonetheless, when you have a situation like this, it presents itself, you cannot turn down the opportunity. And what they should have been doing is really building up the public diplomacy going into the G20 so they could have taken advantage of all those people in the room.
Hey, the thing about this, Tara and David, I would bring you here into the conversation. And let me ask you both, and come back to Gordon and ask you this. If we had a normal administration, a normal functioning administration, what should have happened at the G20? What would we be talking about at the G20 if we had a normal functioning administration? And that's not a partisan thing, Democrat or Republican. Tara, let me start with you and then go to David.
Sure. Well, it's the G20 summit. You have leaders of 20 countries there, and you shouldn't be shunning multilateralism. You should be trying to work together, find common ground on issues. North Korea, one of those issues. Angela Merkel set an agenda focused on displaced persons and migration issues, trade, climate change, issues that there are perhaps disagreements on politically, but issues where there still could be areas of agreement. Terrorism, another key issue that's been front and center, another issue that the Trump administration could have gone in there and set the agenda. Obviously, the Trump-Putin meeting took took center stage for a variety of reasons. But I think that the U.S. had the ability to set the agenda. There could have been tweets sent out on other key foreign policy issues and uniting key countries around those issues, North Korea being the obvious one. And we didn't hear that coming out of President Trump. We didn't hear that coming out of him verbally or during his Twitter account during the G20. And I also think that, these distractions, these conversations about the intel community, the Podesta comments, those are not helpful to any foreign policy or national security issues. They're distractions. They get the media focused on the wrong issues during a very important summit. And to be frank, they show a lack of seriousness, a lack of appreciation for the gravity of some of the issues that we do face today that should have been front and center of the president's mind while he was over there.
Hey, David, before you answer, let's hear what Gary Cohn, the economic advisor to the president, had to say. This related.
To get 20 of your friends to agree to we're going to have dinner tonight is really hard. But I thought the communique came together pretty reasonably. There's a diversity of opinions in a group of 20.
Diversity of opinion, getting a bunch of friends to agree. What?
That's pathetic. That is absolutely pathetic. That's what he's touting as the success here. I mean, I think, to pick up on the last point, starting your visit to the G20 by saying everyone there is talking about John Podesta, I mean, either that's delusional or completely idiotic. You don't have any other options. And so whether it was North Korea, whether it was counterterrorism, the president has shown no real interest in doing the hard work. He came into office saying, hey, I'm going to get China to take care of this. That's what I'm going to do. I have a meeting with China. China will take care of it. He tries, and then he says, oh, I gave it a shot. That's it. Maybe next time. So he's not serious. Of course, as you know, Jonathan, we don't have an ambassador to Korea. Most of the State Department is not functioning. He didn't include McMaster, the National Security Advisor, in the meeting with Putin. So a lot of things that should just be done as a matter of course in any competent, functioning administration is not happening. And you tie that in with Donald Trump's lack of curiosity or interest in a lot of these issues or knowledge, and it really is a recipe for disaster and, as the Australian said, a decline in American leadership on many important issues.
Gordon, so the president's doesn't seem terribly interested in a whole lot of things about the job, but also he places a lot of importance on personal relationships, one-on-one relationships. I mean, he said great things about President Xi a while back about, it's great, we're going to have a great relationship. Same thing about Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and then nothing happens. He placed all this importance on President Xi to help him with North Korea, and I believe it was last week, because it seems like an eternity, it could have been 2 weeks ago, when the president sent out that tweet saying, I put a lot of faith in President Xi to do something about North Korea, and well, hasn't been successful so far. What more must the president do to ensure that the Korean Peninsula does not blow up?
Well, he's going to have to impose severe costs on China. At the last week of June, he did impose costs on China. He unplugged the Chinese bank from the global financial system. He did a number of other things that got Beijing upset. And they were really just signals. And I think what happened at this meeting at the G20 is that Trump said to Xi Jinping in private, because we know that the conversations were direct, as Mnuchin has said. I think what he did was he told the Chinese, I can amp up the pressure. So I think that, in terms of China, what he's doing is one thing saying, oh, they're good guys in public, but in private, they're having very, very tough conversations. And that's probably the right way to go.
Huh. So that's not they're actually, the Trump administration, the president is actually doing something right when it comes to the North Korea crisis.
They're doing something that can turn out right. This is extremely tricky. I'm not saying what Trump is doing is going to work, but what I'm saying is that at least he's laying the groundwork here. And so this is a very difficult conversation with the Chinese. We know they're supplying the North Koreans with ballistic missile technology. Trump needs to deal with this. And instead of actually talking about some of the other issues, I think the president should have said to the Chinese in public as well as in private, how come the North Koreans are launching Chinese missiles?
Well, that's a question we're going to have to save the answer to for another time. Thank you to Gordon Chang, David Corn, and Tara Mahler will be back. Up next, a closer look at the man who was asking Russian hackers for Hillary Clinton's emails. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.